The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Mercantile, and Beatrice Owens climbed down with trembling hands, knowing every eye in St. George, Utah would soon be fixed on the unmistakable swell beneath her traveling cloak. It was September 1878, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the red sandstone buildings that lined the dusty Main Street. She clutched her carpetbag close, the weight of shame pressing harder on her shoulders than the oppressive heat. 6 months along, and the father was nowhere to be found, having disappeared into the night when she told him about the baby, leaving her with nothing but broken promises and a tarnished reputation in Carson City, Nevada. St. George was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where nobody knew her story, where she could work as a seamstress until the baby came and figure out what came after. But fresh starts required courage, and right now, Beatrice felt like she had precious little left. The stagecoach driver set her trunk down with a thud, tipping his hat without meeting her eyes. Even strangers seemed to sense her predicament. Beatrice smoothed her dark brown hair, tucking a loose strand behind her ear, and surveyed the town. St. George was smaller than she had imagined, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering red cliffs that glowed like fire in the afternoon light. The main street boasted a general store, a modest hotel, a blacksmith, and what appeared to be a saloon with faded green doors. Beyond that, she could see a white church steeple rising against the impossibly blue sky. Mormon settlers had established this town, and while Beatrice herself was not of their faith, she hoped they might show Christian charity to a woman in her situation. "You need help with that trunk, madam." A deep voice came from behind her, startling her from her thoughts. Beatrice turned to find a tall man in his late 20s, broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his worn Stetson. He had removed his hat politely, revealing kind hazel eyes that actually looked at her face, not at her midsection. There was something solid about him, something that spoke of hard work and honest living. Dust covered his boots and the legs of his denim trousers, and she noticed the leather work gloves tucked into his belt. "I can manage, thank you," Beatrice said quietly, though she knew that was not entirely true. The trunk held everything she owned, and it was heavy. "I am sure you can," the man said, a gentle smile crossing his weathered face. "But that does not mean you should have to. Name is Marcus Kine. I work at the Double R Ranch just outside town, but I come in for supplies most Fridays." He did not wait for her permission, simply hoisted the trunk onto his shoulder with ease that suggested he spent his days handling much heavier loads. Beatrice felt a flutter of gratitude mixed with apprehension. Kindness, in her recent experience, often came with expectations. "Where are you headed?" Marcus asked, settling the trunk more comfortably. "The boarding house, I believe, Mrs. Weatherby's place. I rode ahead to arrange a room." "I know it. Just up this way." Marcus started walking, adjusting his pace so she could keep up. Beatrice noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. An old injury, perhaps. They walked in silence for a moment, passing a group of women in bonnets who stopped their conversation to stare. Beatrice felt their eyes like brands, burning with judgment and curiosity. She lifted her chin, refusing to show how much it wounded her. She had done nothing wrong by loving unwisely, though the world seemed determined to punish her for it. "People in small towns like to talk," Marcus said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "But most of them are decent folks once you get past the initial fuss. They will get used to you." "Will they?" Beatrice could not keep the bitterness from her voice. "In my experience, certain sins are never forgotten, especially when worn as openly as mine." Marcus glanced at her, his expression thoughtful rather than condemning. I do not figure bringing a child into the world is a sin. Seems to me that is about the most hopeful thing a person can do." The unexpected words brought tears stinging to Beatrice's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She had cried enough over the past few months, wept until she thought she had no tears left. Crying solved nothing, changed nothing. But this stranger's casual kindness, his simple acceptance, threatened to crack the careful walls she had built around her heart. They reached the boarding house, a two-story structure with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch where several rocking chairs sat empty in the heat. Marcus carried the trunk up the steps and set it down near the front door. "Thank you, Mr. Kine," Beatrice said, reaching into her small purse for a coin. Marcus held up his hand. "No need for that. Welcome to St. George, Miss Owens. Beatrice Owens. Mrs. Owens, actually." The lie came automatically, the fictional wedding ring she had purchased in Salt Lake City heavy on her finger. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, understanding perhaps, but he did not challenge her. "Mrs. Owens, I hope you find St. George to your liking. It is a good town for all its smallness." He tipped his hat and turned to leave, that slight limp evident in his gait. Beatrice watched him go, this unexpected cowboy who had shown her more respect in 5 minutes than anyone had in months. She wondered if she would see him again, then pushed the thought away. She was in no position to be thinking about men, not now, probably not ever. Her focus had to be on survival, on preparing for the baby, on building some kind of life from the wreckage of her old one. Mrs. Weatherby proved to be a stout woman in her 50s with sharp blue eyes and an expression that suggested she had seen everything life had to offer at least twice. She looked Beatrice up and down without pretense, her gaze lingering on the obvious pregnancy. "You are the seamstress from Nevada," she said, her tone flat. "I have the room ready. Payment is due every Friday in advance. No men callers, no drinking, no loud noise after 9 in the evening. Breakfast is at 7, supper at 6. You miss it, you fend for yourself. Understood?" "Yes, madam," Beatrice replied, too tired to take offense at the woman's brusque manner. "When is the baby due?" "Late December," the doctor said. Mrs. Weatherby's expression softened slightly, something almost like sympathy crossing her lined face. "My daughter is expecting her third around the same time. Good season for babies, after the worst of the heat passes but before the coldest days set in. Come on, I will show you your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto the street below. Beatrice had seen worse. She had also seen far better, back when her father was alive and their little dress shop in Carson City was thriving. But that life seemed impossibly distant now, separated from her present circumstances by a canyon of poor choices and painful consequences. Mrs. Weatherby lingered in the doorway. "There is a midwife in town, Mrs. Patterson. You should go see her, let her know you are here and when to expect the baby. She is good at what she does, delivered most of the children in St. George." "Thank you, I will. And Miss Owens." Mrs. Weatherby paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Or Mrs. Owens, whichever it is, and I suspect I know which. I do not judge. I was not always the respectable widow running a boarding house. Life has a way of humbling us all if we live long enough. You keep to yourself, do your work, and you will be fine here." The unexpected kindness, coming so close on the heels of Marcus Kine's gentle words, threatened to undo Beatrice completely. She managed a tremulous smile and a nod, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Weatherby seemed to understand, giving a brisk nod of her own before closing the door and leaving Beatrice alone with her thoughts and her uncertain future. That first evening, Beatrice unpacked her belongings. hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her sewing supplies on the small table by the window where the light would be good during the day. She had brought her best scissors, her measuring tape, spools of thread in every color, needles of various sizes, and several yards of fabric she had managed to purchase before leaving Nevada. If she was going to support herself, she needed to establish herself as a seamstress quickly, before the pregnancy advanced too far for her to work comfortably. As the sun set, painting the red cliffs outside her window in shades of orange and purple that took her breath away, Beatrice placed her hand on her rounded belly. The baby kicked, a firm little push against her palm, and despite everything, she smiled. This child, unplanned and unwanted by its father, was nevertheless a life, a person who would depend on her completely. The responsibility terrified her, but beneath the fear ran a thread of fierce protectiveness. She might not have chosen this path, but she would walk it with as much dignity as she could muster. The next morning, after a breakfast of porridge and biscuits served in Mrs. Weatherby's plain but tidy dining room, Beatrice set out to explore the town and let people know she was available for sewing work. She pinned a notice at the general store, offering her services for dressmaking, mending, and alterations. The proprietor, a thin man named Mr. Jessup, eyed her with barely concealed suspicion, but he let her post the notice. "You have references?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "I worked in my father's dress shop in Carson City for 10 years, Beatrice said, keeping her voice steady. "I can provide samples of my work." "We will see," Mr. Jessup said non-committally. "Folks around here are particular about who they do business with." Meaning they would be particular about doing business with an unwed mother, or what they suspected was an unwed mother masquerading as a widow. Beatrice thanked him for his time and left, her cheeks burning with humiliation but her spine straight. She found the midwife's house on a quiet side street, a neat adobe structure with a small garden out front where herbs grew in profusion. Mrs. Patterson was a woman of about 40, with graying hair and competent hands that examined Beatrice with gentle thoroughness. She asked questions about Beatrice's health, her previous monthly courses, whether she had experienced any bleeding or unusual pain. Beatrice answered honestly, grateful for the clinical, non-judgmental nature of the examination. "The baby seems healthy and well-positioned, Mrs. Patterson said, washing her hands in a basin. "You are carrying well for 6 months. Make sure you are eating enough, drinking plenty of water, especially in this heat. Get rest when you can, but also walk every day to keep your strength up. I will want to see you once a month until the last 2 months, then every week." "How much do you charge?" Beatrice asked, calculating what little money she had left. "We can discuss payment when the time comes," Mrs. Patterson said. "I have never turned away a mother in need. Sometimes I get paid in chickens or vegetables or sewing work instead of money. We make do." Once again, unexpected kindness. Beatrice found herself thanking the midwife with genuine warmth, feeling for the first time since arriving that perhaps St. George might indeed offer her the fresh start she so desperately needed. Over the next few weeks, Beatrice established a routine. She woke early, did her own mending and sewing samples, took a walk through town in the relative cool of the morning, and spent the afternoons working on the few commissions that had started to trickle in. The first came from Mrs. Weatherby herself, who needed 2 dresses altered. Then a young mother brought in a pile of her children's clothes that needed mending. The work was simple, not particularly well paid, but it was work, and Beatrice threw herself into it with determination. She saw Marcus Kine occasionally, always on Fridays when he came to town. He would tip his hat to her, Sometimes exchange a few words about the weather or some bit of town news, but never pried, never asked questions she would not want to answer. There was something comforting about his steady presence. The way he treated her with the same courteous respect he seemed to show everyone. One Friday in early October, Beatrice was sitting on the porch of the boarding house, hemming a skirt in the afternoon light when Marcus rode up on a large bay horse. He dismounted with practiced ease, despite the slight awkwardness caused by his limp, and tied the horse to the hitching post. "Afternoon, Mrs. Owens," he said, climbing the porch steps. "Good afternoon, Mr. Kine." Beatrice set down her sewing. The baby had been particularly active today, and her back ached from sitting in one position too long. Marcus held out a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I was at the general store, and Mr. Jessup mentioned you had been looking for ivory-colored thread. He just got some in, and I thought you might want to know." Beatrice took the package, surprised. "You bought this for me. Seemed like you might need it, and I know you do not always find it easy to go into Jessup's store." Marcus said this matter-of-factly, without pity, simply acknowledging a truth they both knew. "That is very kind of you. Please, let me pay you back." Beatrice started to rise, to go fetch her coin purse, but Marcus waved her back down. "Consider it a welcome gift. St. George is a better place with skilled folks like you in it." He made as if to leave, but Beatrice found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Kine, would you like to sit for a moment? I could bring out some water. You must be thirsty after your ride." Marcus looked surprised but pleased. "That would be nice, thank you." Beatrice went inside and returned with 2 glasses of cool water from the pump. Marcus had settled into one of the rocking chairs, his hat on his knee, looking out at the dusty street with an expression of contentment. He accepted the water gratefully and drank deeply. "How are you finding St. George?" he asked. "It is an adjustment," Beatrice admitted, sitting back down with her sewing. "Smaller than I am used to, quieter, but the landscape is beautiful, especially at sunset." "That it is. I have been here 3 years now, and I still sometimes just stop what I am doing to look at those cliffs." "Makes you feel small in a good way, if that makes sense." "It does," Beatrice said softly. "Where are you from originally?" "Texas, down near San Antonio. My family had a small ranch there. After my father died, my older brother took over the place. There was not really room for both of us, and I wanted to see something of the country anyway, so I headed west. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, did odd jobs until I landed here. The double R needed experienced hands and I needed steady work. Turned out to be a good fit." "Do you miss Texas?" Marcus considered this. "Sometimes. I miss my mother, my sisters, but I write letters when I can, and my youngest sister is good about writing back. Life moves forward, you know. You cannot always be looking backward." Beatrice felt the weight of those words. She had spent so much time dwelling on her mistakes, on what she should have done differently, that she had barely allowed herself to look ahead. That is wise advice. I do not know about wise, but it is what I tell myself when I get to dwelling on things that cannot be changed. Marcus paused, then added carefully, "If you do not mind my asking, do you have family?" "No," Beatrice said, the word coming out more sharply than she intended. She softened her tone. "My mother died when I was young. My father passed 2 years ago. There was a man I thought I would marry, but that did not work out. The understatement of the century, but it would suffice." "I am sorry," Marcus said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, the only sounds the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the whisper of a dry breeze through the dusty street. Finally, Marcus stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I should let you get back to your work. Thank you for the water, Mrs. Owens." Thank you for the thread, Mr. Kine. As Marcus untied his horse and swung into the saddle, Beatrice found herself hoping she would see him again soon. The thought both pleased and alarmed her. She had no business thinking warm thoughts about any man, not in her condition, not with her past. But Marcus Kine, with his quiet kindness and lack of judgment, had somehow slipped past her defenses without her quite realizing it. The weather began to cool as October progressed, the brutal desert heat giving way to pleasant days and chilly nights. Beatrice's sewing business grew slowly but steadily. Word spread that she was skilled and reliable, and women began bringing her more substantial projects. New dresses, wedding clothes for an upcoming marriage, curtains for a new house being built on the edge of town. The work kept her busy and brought in enough money to pay Mrs. Weatherby and buy food and necessary supplies. Her pregnancy advanced noticeably. By mid-October, she was well into her 7th month, and moving was becoming more awkward. The baby seemed to have taken up residence right beneath her ribcage, making it difficult to draw a deep breath. But Mrs. Patterson assured her everything was progressing normally, and for that Beatrice was grateful. She saw Marcus every Friday without fail. Sometimes they only exchanged greetings. Other times, if the weather was pleasant, he would sit on the porch with her for a few minutes, sharing town news or talking about nothing in particular. Beatrice found herself looking forward to these visits with an eagerness that should have worried her more than it did. Marcus never asked invasive questions, never made her feel ashamed or uncomfortable. He simply treated her like a person worthy of respect and friendship, and that gift was more precious than he could possibly know. One Friday in late October, Marcus arrived later than usual, the sun already low on the horizon. Beatrice had just finished supper and was wrapping herself in a shawl against the evening chill, preparing to take her daily walk before the light failed completely. Mrs. Owens, Marcus called from the street, dismounting quickly. There was an urgency in his manner that was unusual for him. I am glad I caught you before dark. I wanted to talk to you about something. Is everything all right? Beatrice came down the porch steps, concerned. Yes, everything is fine. It is just that the foreman at the ranch, his wife Sarah, she heard about your sewing skills. They have 6 children, and Sarah is beside herself trying to keep them all in clothes that fit. She wondered if you might be willing to come out to the ranch, take measurements, maybe sew some things for them. She would pay well, and we could provide dinner and transport, of course. I would drive you out in the wagon and bring you back. The idea of leaving town, even for a day, filled Beatrice with both excitement and apprehension. I am not sure that would be proper, Mr. Kine. A woman in my condition, unmarried. She caught herself. I mean, without my husband. Marcus looked at her steadily. Mrs. Owens, I think we both know you do not have a husband, not really. And that is your business, not mine or anyone else's. But that baby you are carrying deserves a father, someone to look after both of you, to provide and protect. And it seems to me that the world is full of rules about what is proper that do not take into account real life and real people doing their best in difficult circumstances. Beatrice felt her heart begin to pound. Mr. Kine, I do not understand what you are saying. Marcus took a step closer, his hazel eyes intense in the fading light. I am saying that I have been thinking about your situation and about my own situation, and wondering if maybe we could help each other out. I am saying that I would be honored if you would consider marrying me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. Beatrice stared at Marcus, unable to formulate a response. This man, this virtual stranger, was proposing marriage. To her, pregnant with another man's child, carrying shame like a visible scar. You do not even know me, she whispered. I know enough, Marcus said. I know you are brave, coming to a new town alone in your condition. I know you are hardworking and skilled. I know you have been treated poorly by someone who should have treated you better, and that makes me angry on your behalf. I know that when I see you on Fridays, it is the best part of my week. And I know that baby needs a father, and I would be proud to be that father if you would let me. Tears streamed down Beatrice's face now, hot and unchecked. Why would you do this? You could have any woman in town, someone without complications, without a past. I do not want any woman in town, Marcus said simply. I want you if you will have me. I am not saying I expect anything from you right away, or that we have to pretend to be something we are not. I am just saying let me give that child a name and you the protection of marriage. The rest, whatever else might come, we can figure out as we go. Beatrice wanted to say yes so badly it hurt. The relief of not facing the birth alone, of having someone to help shoulder the burden, was almost overwhelming. But she forced herself to think practically, to not let emotion cloud her judgment as it had before. This is not fair to you, she said. You would be taking on another man's child, another man's responsibility. What do you get out of this arrangement? Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I get a chance at the family I always wanted. I get a wife who I genuinely respect and care for, who I think I could build a good life with. And maybe that child gets a father who will love him or her, and maybe that matters more than who provided the seed. I never had much use for those who think bloodlines matter more than commitment. I cannot promise that I will ever. Beatrice struggled to voice her fear. That I will feel for you what a wife should feel for a husband. The man who did this to me, I thought I loved him, and look where that led. I do not trust my own judgment anymore. I am not asking for promises about feelings, Marcus said. I am just asking if you will marry me and let me be a father to that baby. The rest, like I said, we will figure out together. Beatrice looked at this man, this unexpected blessing who had appeared in her life when she needed him most. She thought about raising a child alone, about the whispers and stares that would follow her baby through childhood. She thought about how hard it would be to work and care for an infant with no help. And she thought about how Marcus had never once made her feel small or ashamed, how he treated her with a respect that made her remember she was worth respecting. Yes, she said, the word coming out soft but clear. Yes, I will marry you. The smile that broke across Marcus's face was like sunrise, transforming his features from pleasant to genuinely handsome. He took her hands in his work-roughened palms warm against her skin. You will not regret this, Beatrice. I swear to you, I will do everything in my power to be a good husband and father. I believe you, Beatrice said, and realized with some surprise that she did. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the white church on the edge of town. Mrs. Weatherby stood as witness, along with Marcus's foreman from the ranch, a weathered man named Tom Prescott who shook Beatrice's hand with genuine warmth. The minister, an elderly man with kind eyes, asked no uncomfortable questions, simply performed the ceremony with quiet dignity. Beatrice wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that she had let out at the seams to accommodate her pregnancy. Marcus wore clean trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a string tie. He had even had a bath at the barber shop and gotten his hair trimmed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus leaned down and kissed Beatrice's cheek with such gentleness that fresh tears sprang to her eyes. After the ceremony, Marcus took her to the small house he had been renting on the outskirts of St. George, a 2-room structure with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and a bedroom separated by a curtain. It was not much, but it was clean and sturdy, and Marcus had clearly made an effort to prepare it for her arrival. There were wildflowers in a jar on the table, and the bed had fresh linens. "I know it is not fancy," Marcus said, looking around the modest space with something like embarrassment. "But the ranch pays decent, and I have been saving up. In a year or two, I am hoping to buy some land, maybe start building a place of our own." "It is wonderful," Beatrice said honestly. After weeks in a boarding house room, the idea of a home, even a small one, was more appealing than any mansion. "Thank you, Marcus. I will sleep out here by the fire," Marcus said, gesturing to the main room. "You take the bedroom. I want you to be comfortable." "You do not have to do that." "This is your home." "It is our home now," Marcus corrected gently. "And like I said, I am not expecting anything from you. We will take this slow, let things develop naturally." That night, lying alone in the bedroom while Marcus settled himself by the dying fire, Beatrice placed her hands on her swollen belly and marveled at the turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been alone and uncertain, facing single motherhood in a town that barely tolerated her. Now she was married to a good man who was offering her child a name and a future. It seemed too good to be true, and yet here she was, Mrs. Marcus Kine, with a wedding ring that was not a prop but a real symbol of real vows. The baby kicked hard as if celebrating this new development, and Beatrice smiled in the darkness. "You have a father now," she whispered. "A real father who wants you. We are going to be all right." Married life with Marcus was an adjustment, but a surprisingly pleasant one. He left early each morning for the ranch, often before dawn, and returned in the early evening smelling of horses and hay and hard work. He always asked about her day, listened with genuine interest when she talked about her sewing projects or the town gossip she picked up. He helped with tasks that had become difficult for her as the pregnancy advanced, hauling water, chopping wood, reaching high shelves. They ate their meals together, simple fare that Marcus cooked with competent efficiency. He had been taking care of himself for years, and while his cooking was plain, it was edible and filling. Beatrice, who had never been much of a cook herself, appreciated not having to figure out how to prepare meals while managing the physical challenges of late pregnancy. At night, Marcus continued to sleep by the fire, true to his word about not pressuring her. Sometimes Beatrice heard him moving restlessly, and she wondered if the hard floor bothered his old injury. But when she suggested he at least take the bed and she would take the floor, he refused adamantly. "You are 7 months pregnant with a baby that likes to kick your ribs at midnight," he said firmly. "You need the bed. I have slept in far worse places than a floor next to a warm fire, believe me." As November arrived and Beatrice entered her 8th month, she found herself increasingly grateful for Marcus's steady presence. The pregnancy was becoming more uncomfortable, her back aching constantly, her ankles swelling, the baby pressing on organs in ways that made sleep difficult. Mrs. Patterson visited weekly now, checking on both mother and child, pronouncing everything normal but acknowledging that the final weeks were always the hardest. One evening, after an particularly exhausting day, Beatrice was sitting in the rocking chair Marcus had brought home from town, trying to find a comfortable position. Marcus was cleaning up after supper, and she watched him moving around their small kitchen with quiet efficiency. "Marcus," she said suddenly, and he turned to look at her. "Why did you really marry me? I mean, I know what you said about the baby deserving a father, but there has to be more to it than that. You have given up your freedom, taken on a wife and child that are not your responsibility. I just want to understand." Marcus dried his hands on a cloth and came to sit on the floor near her rocking chair, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "You want the full truth, please." "I was getting lonely," Marcus said simply. "I have friends at the ranch, and the work keeps me busy. But at the end of the day, I was going back to an empty house and eating alone and sleeping alone, and I started to wonder if that was all there was going to be. I am almost 30 years old and I wanted a family, wanted someone to build a life with. And then you arrived in town, and I saw you climbing down from that stagecoach looking scared but determined, and something in my chest just tightened up. He paused, looking down at his hands. Every week I would come to town and find an excuse to talk to you, and every week I admired you more. The way you held your head up even when people were talking behind your back. The way you worked so hard to build a life for yourself and that baby. The way you never asked for pity or made excuses. You were just dealing with your situation with more courage than most men I know would have shown. I did not feel courageous, Beatrice said softly. Courage is not about not being scared. It is about doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified, and you have that in abundance. Marcus looked up at her, his hazel eyes serious. The truth is, I married you because I wanted to, not just because I thought it was the right thing to do. I married you because I was already halfway in love with you, and I figured even if you never felt the same way about me, at least I would get to spend my life near you. That seemed better than spending it alone. Beatrice's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. You love me. I do, Marcus said. I know it is too soon to say that, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable. I am not expecting you to say it back. I just wanted you to know that this is not some sacrifice on my part. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, and I thank God every day that you said yes. Without thinking, Beatrice reached down and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I do not know if what I feel is love yet. I am still learning to trust my own heart again. But I care for you, Marcus, more than I expected to. You have been nothing but kind and patient and good, and I want you to know how much that means to me. I want to try to see if we can build something real together. Marcus's smile was worth more than gold. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. That is all I could ask for. That night, for the first time, Beatrice invited Marcus to sleep in the bedroom with her. Not to make love, she was not ready for that, and the pregnancy made it impractical anyway, but just to share the space, to not be separated anymore. Marcus accepted gratefully, and they lay on opposite sides of the bed, a respectable distance between them, but together in a way that felt significant. Thank you for giving me a chance, Marcus said into the darkness. Thank you for being worth taking a chance on, Beatrice replied. As November progressed toward December, Beatrice found her feelings for Marcus growing deeper and more complex. She noticed things about him she had not paid attention to before. The way he hummed while he worked, the gentle way he handled the horses when he brought them home, the careful way he read his letters from Texas, his lips moving silently over the words. He told her stories about his childhood, about his mother's cooking and his father's gruff wisdom, about his sisters and the trouble they used to get into. In turn, Beatrice began to share her own stories about her father's dress shop, about learning to sew as a girl, about her mother who she barely remembered but who her father said had the voice of an angel. She did not talk much about the baby's father, and Marcus did not press. All he knew was that the man had abandoned her when she needed him most, and that was enough for him to hold the unknown man in permanent contempt. That baby is going to know nothing but love from the day it is born, Marcus declared one evening. Boy or girl, it will be my child in every way that matters, and I will make sure he or she never doubts that for a second. Beatrice believed him, and that belief was its own form of healing. As her due date approached, Beatrice found herself increasingly uncomfortable, but also increasingly impatient to meet the baby. She had spent so long thinking of the pregnancy as a problem to be solved, a source of shame to be hidden, that she had not allowed herself to be excited about the actual child. But now, married to Marcus, secure in their small house, she let herself dream about the baby's face, about holding a tiny warm body, about watching Marcus become a father. On a cold morning in mid-December, Beatrice woke to a sharp pain in her lower back that made her gasp. It eased after a moment, and she thought perhaps she had just slept wrong. But an hour later it came again, harder this time, wrapping around her belly like a band. She knew what this meant. "Marcus," she called, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "I think the baby is coming." Marcus, who had been getting ready to leave for the ranch, went pale. "Now, are you sure? The pains have started. You need to get Mrs. Patterson." Marcus moved faster than Beatrice had ever seen him move despite his limp. He saddled his horse in record time and galloped toward town, leaving Beatrice to manage the increasingly frequent contractions alone. She tried to remember everything Mrs. Patterson had told her about labor, about staying calm, about walking to help things progress. She paced their small house, breathing through the pains, telling herself that women had been doing this since the beginning of time and she could do it too. Mrs. Patterson arrived within the hour, Marcus on her heels looking genuinely terrified. The midwife took one look at Beatrice and gave a brisk nod. "You are definitely in labor. How far apart are the pains?" "Maybe 10 minutes," Beatrice gasped as another contraction gripped her. "Good, we have time. First babies usually take a while. Marcus, boil water and get clean linens. Then you can wait outside." "Outside?" Marcus looked stricken. "I should be here, should I not?" "This is women's work," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You will just be in the way. Trust me to take care of your wife." But Beatrice reached for Marcus's hand, gripping it hard. "I want him to stay. Please, I need him here." Mrs. Patterson looked surprised but nodded. "All right then, but you follow my instructions and stay out of my way." The labor was long and hard, lasting well into the evening. Beatrice had never experienced pain like this, waves of it that left her gasping and shaking. But Marcus stayed by her side the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand until she thought she might break bones, wiping the sweat from her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even though his own face was white with worry. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "So strong. Just a bit longer." When the urge to push finally came, primal and overwhelming, Mrs. Patterson positioned herself to receive the baby. "That is it, dear. Push with the next contraction. Give it everything you have." Beatrice bore down, feeling like she was being torn in half, feeling like she could not possibly do this. But Marcus's voice was in her ear, steady and sure, telling her she could, telling her she was almost there. And then, with one final push that took everything she had left, the baby slipped free into Mrs. Patterson's waiting hands. The thin, reedy cry that followed was the most beautiful sound Beatrice had ever heard. "You have a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, quickly clearing the baby's nose and mouth. "A healthy boy with good lungs, by the sound of it." She wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him in Beatrice's arms. Beatrice looked down at the tiny, red, furious face, at the miniature fists waving in indignation, and felt her heart crack open with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am your mother." She looked up at Marcus, who was staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "Would you like to hold your son?" Marcus's eyes shot to hers, full of emotion. "My son, our son," Beatrice corrected gently. With shaking hands, Marcus took the baby, cradling the tiny body against his broad chest with a gentleness that belied his size. The baby quieted almost immediately, seeming to sense the safety of those strong arms. Marcus touched the baby's cheek with one calloused finger, his face transformed by joy. "He is perfect," Marcus breathed. "Absolutely perfect." Mrs. Patterson finished her work with Beatrice, making sure everything was as it should be, then gave them privacy while she cleaned up in the kitchen. Beatrice lay exhausted in the bed, watching her husband hold their son, and felt something inside her settle into place. This was her family. This unlikely, unexpected, precious family. "What should we name him?" Marcus asked softly. Beatrice had been thinking about this. "My father's name was Benjamin. I would like to use that if you approve." "Benjamin Kine," Marcus said, testing the name. "I like it. Benjamin Marcus Kine. That is perfect." They named their son Benjamin Marcus Kine, and the birth was registered that way, with Marcus listed as the father and no one in St. George any the wiser about the child's true origins. Not that it mattered to Marcus. From the moment Benjamin was placed in his arms, he was besotted. He would hold the baby for hours, walking the floor with him when he fussed at night, changing soiled cloths without complaint, singing old cowboy songs in his rumbling baritone, until Benjamin's eyes drooped closed. Beatrice watched her husband transform into a father and felt her own heart opening wider to let him in. This man who had married her out of a combination of duty and affection was proving himself to be everything she could have hoped for and more. The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting. Benjamin wanted to eat constantly, and Beatrice spent what felt like every waking hour nursing him. She was grateful for Mrs. Weatherby, who stopped by regularly with soup and bread, and for Mrs. Patterson, who checked on them to make sure Beatrice was healing properly. But most of all, she was grateful for Marcus, who handled the housework and the cooking and anything else that needed doing so Beatrice could rest and focus on the baby. One night, about 2 weeks after Benjamin's birth, Beatrice woke to find Marcus's side of the bed empty. She heard murmuring from the main room and got up carefully, still sore from the birth. She found Marcus sitting in the rocking chair with Benjamin in his arms, the baby wide awake and staring up at his father with unfocused eyes. "I know you are too young to understand this," Marcus was saying softly, "but I want you to know that you are loved, little man. I am going to teach you to ride and rope, and all the things my father taught me. I am going to make sure you grow up good and kind and strong. And I am never going to let anyone make you feel like you are less than worthy, you hear me? You are my son, and I am proud of that." Beatrice's throat tightened with emotion. She had worried in quiet moments whether Marcus would truly be able to love a child that was not biologically his, whether some resentment might creep in over time. But watching him now, seeing the pure love on his face as he looked at Benjamin, she knew her fears were unfounded. Marcus loved this baby completely, just as he had promised. She stepped into the room and Marcus looked up with a guilty smile. "Sorry, did we wake you?" "No, I just realized you were not in bed." Beatrice came to stand beside the rocking chair, looking down at her son. "What were you two talking about?" "Just man things," Marcus said with a hint of humor. "Telling him about all the trouble we are going to get into together." Beatrice ran her fingers through Marcus's dark hair, the gesture affectionate and without thought. Marcus leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "You are a good father, Marcus Kine. I am trying to be. You are not trying, you just are." Beatrice bent and kissed the top of his head, the gesture feeling natural and right. "I am very glad I married you." Marcus opened his eyes and looked up at her, and the tenderness in his gaze made her breath catch. "I am very glad you did too." That night marked a turning point in their relationship. Beatrice had been holding back, protecting her heart, unsure if she could trust her feelings. But Marcus's devotion to Benjamin, his unwavering goodness, had worn down her defenses. She was falling in love with her husband, truly in love, not the impulsive infatuation she had felt for Benjamin's biological father, but something deeper and more solid. As the weeks passed and they settled into their new life as a family, Beatrice found herself touching Marcus more often, reaching for his hand, resting her head on his shoulder when they sat together in the evenings. Marcus responded with careful joy, as if he could not quite believe this was happening, but was determined to treasure every moment. One night in January, as they lay in bed with Benjamin asleep in his cradle nearby, Beatrice turned to face Marcus in the darkness. "I love you," she said, the words coming out clear and sure. "I have been afraid to say it, afraid to trust myself, but I do. I love you, Marcus." She felt him go very still, then his arms came around her, pulling her close. "Say it again," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you." "I love you too," Marcus said. "God, Beatrice, I love you so much." He kissed her then, properly, the first real kiss they had shared since their wedding day. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Beatrice felt the last of her walls crumble. This was her husband, her partner, the father of her child in every way that mattered. This was where she belonged. Their marriage became a true marriage that night, consummated with tenderness and care, Marcus mindful of her body still healing from childbirth, Beatrice grateful for his patience and gentleness. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Beatrice felt a peace she had not known in years. She had been given a second chance, a new beginning, and she was determined not to waste it. As winter gave way to spring, the Kine family thrived. Benjamin grew chubby and healthy, his face taking on more defined features, his eyes settling into a clear hazel that reminded Beatrice of Marcus. People in St. George who had initially been suspicious of her now greeted her warmly on the street, won over by Marcus's obvious devotion and by the sight of their little family. She was no longer the shameful pregnant woman who had arrived alone, but Mrs. Kine, respectable wife and mother. Beatrice's sewing business continued to grow, and she began to dream about opening a small dress shop in town. Marcus encouraged her ambitions, helping her calculate costs and plan for the future. He had saved most of his wages over the years, and combined with what Beatrice was earning, they were building a decent nest egg. In April, Marcus came home with exciting news. The owner of the Double R Ranch was selling off parcels of his land to his most trusted employees, and Marcus had the opportunity to buy 40 acres at a good price. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to start a small ranch of their own, to build the life Marcus had always dreamed of. "What do you think?" Marcus asked Beatrice, his excitement barely contained. "We would have to use most of our savings, and it would mean a lot of hard work to build a house and get a herd started, but it would be ours, our land, our future." "I think it sounds wonderful," Beatrice said honestly. "I think we should do it." They bought the land in May, 40 acres of high desert with a good spring and views of the red cliffs that still took Beatrice's breath away. It would take years to build the ranch into something profitable, but they had time and determination and each other. Marcus continued working at the Double R while beginning to build a small house on their own property, working on their land on his days off and in the evenings when the light lasted long enough. Beatrice helped as she could, caring for Benjamin and managing their household while also continuing her sewing. She designed and made a set of curtains for the new house, simple but cheerful calico that would brighten the rooms. She sewed clothes for Benjamin, little shirts and trousers that he would need as he grew. And she made Marcus new shirts, cutting and stitching with care, wanting him to look his best. By the time Benjamin turned 1 year old in December 1879, their house on their own land was nearly finished, a small but solid structure with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a large fireplace, and a separate kitchen. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and paid for with their own labor. They moved in just before Christmas, and Beatrice stood in the main room of their new home with Benjamin on her hip and Marcus's arm around her shoulders, marveling at how far they had come in just over a year. "Remember when I first met you?" Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. "Climbing down from that stagecoach looking so scared and brave." "I remember thinking you were the kindest man I had ever met," Beatrice replied. "I still think that." "I think we have done all right, you and me," Marcus said. "We have a good son, a good home, a good life together." "We have done better than all right," Beatrice corrected, turning to kiss him. "We have built something beautiful." Their first Christmas in their own home was simple but joyful. Marcus cut a small pine tree and Beatrice decorated it with paper ornaments and strings of berries. Benjamin, newly walking, toddled around the tree with squeals of delight, trying to grab the shiny decorations. They ate a modest Christmas dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, and exchanged simple gifts. A new hat for Marcus that Beatrice had saved up to buy, a beautiful shawl for Beatrice that Marcus had traded for in town, and wooden blocks for Benjamin that Marcus had carved himself in the evenings. As they sat by the fire that evening, Benjamin asleep in his new bed in the small room he would grow into, Beatrice reflected on the year that had passed. A year ago, she had been terrified and alone, facing an uncertain future. Now she was loved and secure, with a family that was everything she had never dared to hope for. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, squeezing his hand. "For what?" "For seeing past my shame to the person underneath. For giving Benjamin a father when he needed one. For loving us both so completely." "Thank you for trusting me," Marcus replied. "For taking a chance on a cowboy with more heart than sense. For making me a husband and a father. For choosing to love me back." They kissed, long and sweet, and outside the window the snow began to fall, dusting their land in white, making everything clean and new, just like their life together. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. Marcus divided his time between working at the Double R, which still provided their main income, and building up their own small ranch. He bought cattle, just a few head at first, breeding stock that would form the foundation of their herd. He built a barn and corrals, fences and storage sheds. Beatrice tended a large garden that provided vegetables for their table and chickens that gave them eggs and occasional meat. Benjamin grew from a toddler into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, mimicking Marcus's walk and mannerisms in ways that made Beatrice's heart squeeze with love. There was never any question in Benjamin's mind about who his father was. Marcus was the only father he knew, and Marcus treated him with a devotion that went beyond biology. In the summer of 1881, when Benjamin was 2.5, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. She had suspected it for a few weeks, the familiar nausea and fatigue unmistakable, but she waited until she was certain before telling Marcus. She chose a moment when they were alone, Benjamin visiting with Mrs. Weatherby in town while Beatrice and Marcus worked on expanding the garden. "Marcus, I have something to tell you," she said, setting down her hoe. He looked up from where he was turning soil, wiping sweat from his brow. "What is it?" "I am pregnant. We are going to have another baby." Marcus's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, then joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. He dropped his shovel and crossed to her in 3 long strides, sweeping her into his arms. "Another baby, truly, truly. The baby should come in early February, Mrs. Patterson thinks." "This is wonderful," Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion. "Benjamin is going to be a big brother, and this one is ours, made from our love." Beatrice understood what he meant. Benjamin would always be their son, would always be loved equally. But this new baby would be biologically both of theirs, conceived in love and marriage. It was a different kind of beginning, and she was excited to experience it with Marcus. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Benjamin seemed to understand in his limited toddler way that something important was happening. He would pat Beatrice's growing belly and say "baby" with great seriousness, making both his parents laugh. Mrs. Patterson checked on Beatrice regularly, pronouncing everything healthy and normal. This pregnancy felt different from the first, Beatrice realized. There was no shame, no fear about the future. She was carrying a child in a loving marriage, secure in her home, and the difference in her emotional state was profound. In February 1882, on a cold morning with snow on the ground, Beatrice went into labor. Marcus sent for Mrs. Patterson and stayed by Beatrice's side as he had for Benjamin's birth. This labor was shorter and somewhat easier, perhaps because her body knew what to do now. When their daughter slipped into the world, crying lustily, Marcus wept openly. "A daughter," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We have a daughter." They named her Rose after Marcus's mother, and she was perfect. Dark hair like her father and blue eyes that Beatrice hoped would stay that way. Benjamin, brought home from Mrs. Weatherby's to meet his new sister, peered into the cradle with great interest. "Baby Rose," he said carefully, and reached out one chubby finger to touch her tiny hand. Rose's fingers closed around Benjamin's finger, and Beatrice and Marcus exchanged a look of pure joy. "Our family," Marcus said, gathering Benjamin onto his lap while Beatrice held Rose. "Our beautiful family." The years that followed were full of hard work, but also deep contentment. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Marcus eventually left his position at the Double R to focus entirely on their own operation. It was a financial risk, but their herd had grown large enough, and Beatrice's sewing business had expanded to the point where she had regular contracts with several stores in St. George and surrounding towns. Together, they made enough to support themselves and even set aside a little for the future. Benjamin and Rose grew up as true siblings, with all the love and occasional squabbling that entailed. Benjamin was protective of his little sister, and Rose idolized her big brother. Neither child knew the truth about Benjamin's parentage, and Marcus and Beatrice decided early on that they never would. Benjamin was Marcus's son in every way that mattered, and there was no need to burden him with information that might make him question his place in their family. In the spring of 1884, when Benjamin was 5 and Rose was 2, Beatrice found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed. Their third child, a son they named Daniel, was born in November of that year, completing their family. Daniel had his mother's dark brown hair and a sunny disposition that made him easy to love. With 3 children, the house was lively and often chaotic, but Marcus and Beatrice thrived on it. They had built something strong and good, a family founded on love and commitment, and the determination to honor the vows they had made to each other. As the years passed, the Kine Ranch became known as one of the most well-run small operations in the area. Marcus had a reputation for fair dealing and hard work, and people respected him. Beatrice's dress shop, which she finally opened in town when Daniel was old enough to start school, became the place women went for quality sewing and custom dresses. She employed 2 other seamstresses and taught them her skills, creating a small but thriving business. Benjamin grew into a tall, serious boy who loved the ranch and the cattle. He spent every spare moment with his father, learning to ride and rope and brand. Rose was clever and quick-witted, showing an early aptitude for figures that made Beatrice think she might one day help manage the business side of the ranch. Daniel was still young, but already showing signs of his father's gentle strength. One evening in the summer of 1890, when Benjamin was 11, Rose was 8, and Daniel was 5. The family sat together on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over the red cliffs. It had become something of a ritual, this quiet time together at the end of the day, before the children went to bed and Marcus and Beatrice had a few precious hours alone. "Papa," Benjamin said, leaning against Marcus's shoulder, "when I grow up, I want to run a ranch just like this one." "This ranch will be yours someday, son," Marcus said, ruffling Benjamin's dark hair. "Yours and Rose's and Daniel's. It is what your mother and I have been building for you." "And I am going to help," Rose announced. "I am going to keep the books and make sure we do not lose money." "What about you, Daniel?" Beatrice asked, pulling her youngest onto her lap even though he was getting too big for it. "What do you want to do when you grow up?" "I want to be like Papa," Daniel said simply. "He is the best man in the whole world." Beatrice met Marcus's eyes over their children's heads, and the love and gratitude she saw there mirrored her own feelings. They had built this family, this life, from the most unpromising beginnings. She had arrived in St. George alone and ashamed, carrying another man's child, and Marcus had looked past all of that to see her worth. He had said that baby deserved a father, and he had stepped up to be that father and so much more. "I love you," she mouthed to Marcus, and his smile was everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red, the kind family sat together in perfect contentment. They had challenges ahead, certainly. The ranch required constant work. The children would grow and need guidance through their own struggles, and life was never without its difficulties. But they would face everything together, bound by love and commitment, and the promises they had made to each other on that day in the little white church in St. George. Beatrice thought back to the terrified woman she had been, climbing down from that stagecoach 12 years ago. She wished she could tell that younger self that everything would be all right, that the shame and fear would give way to love and security, that the baby she carried would grow up happy and loved, that she would find a man worthy of her trust. But perhaps that younger self would not have believed it. Sometimes you had to live through the hard times to appreciate the good ones that followed. Sometimes you had to lose everything to realize what truly mattered. And sometimes, just sometimes, grace appeared in the form of a cowboy with kind eyes and a limp, who saw past your shame to the person underneath and offered you and your unborn child a future. Marcus had said that baby deserved a father. What he had not said, but what Beatrice had learned through years of marriage, was that he believed she deserved love and respect and partnership. He had given her all of that and more, and in return, she had given him her whole heart. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Benjamin pointed upward. "Look, the first star. Make a wish." The children all closed their eyes, faces scrunched in concentration as they made their silent wishes. Beatrice looked at each of them in turn, these 3 miracles, then at Marcus, the greatest miracle of all. She did not need to make a wish. She already had everything she could possibly want. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Benjamin became Marcus's right hand, working the cattle with skill that made his father proud. At 15, he was already as tall as Marcus, with the same quiet strength and steady temperament. Rose, at 12, had indeed taken over the ranch's bookkeeping, her neat hand recording every expense and profit with meticulous care. Daniel, at 10, was growing into a charming and energetic boy who could make anyone laugh. The ranch prospered. They had expanded to over 200 head of cattle and had built a larger house to accommodate their growing children. Beatrice's dress shop in town was now the premier destination for clothing in St. George and surrounding areas, with 4 seamstresses working for her. She had trained each of them personally, taking pride in maintaining the high standards that had made her business successful. Marcus and Beatrice's love had deepened with time, weathering the normal challenges of marriage and family life to become something unshakable. They still had their ritual of sitting together on the porch in the evenings, though now it was often just the two of them as the children pursued their own interests. They would hold hands and talk about their day, their dreams for the future, the everyday intimacies that made a marriage strong. One spring evening in 1895, as they sat watching another spectacular sunset, Marcus turned to Beatrice with a thoughtful expression. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Sometimes I wonder if you ever wish you had waited, found someone else, had a different life." Beatrice looked at him in genuine surprise. "Marcus Kine, are you seriously asking me that after 17 years of marriage?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Marcus said. "You did not choose this life, not really. Circumstances pushed you into it." "Circumstances brought us together," Beatrice corrected. "But I chose to say yes to your proposal. I chose to love you. I chose this life, and I choose it again every single day. You are the best man I have ever known, and these years with you have been the happiest of my life." Marcus's relief was visible. "I love you so much, B. Sometimes I still cannot believe you are mine." "I am yours," Beatrice confirmed, leaning over to kiss him. "Just as you are mine. We belong to each other now and always." As if to prove the point, Benjamin came out onto the porch at that moment, followed by Rose and Daniel. Benjamin had grown into a handsome young man of 16, with his mother's dark hair and the hazel eyes that came from neither parent, but somehow suited him perfectly. "Papa, I need your advice about something," Benjamin said, settling onto the porch railing. "What is it, son?" Tom Prescott's daughter Sarah. "You know her." Marcus and Beatrice exchanged amused glances. Tom Prescott was Marcus's old foreman from the Double R, and they had remained friends over the years. His daughter Sarah was a pretty girl of about 16 with blonde hair and a sweet disposition. "We know her," Marcus said carefully. "What about her?" "I want to ask if I can call on her properly, but I wanted to check with you and Mama first." "You are asking permission to court a girl," Beatrice said, trying not to smile at her son's earnest expression. "That is very proper of you." "Tom Prescott is a good man, and from what I know of Sarah, she is a nice girl," Marcus said. "If you are interested in her, and if she and her father are agreeable, I do not see why you should not call on her." Benjamin's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Papa. I will talk to Mr. Prescott this week." After Benjamin went back inside, Rose lingered on the porch. "Mama, Papa, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart," Beatrice said. "Mrs. Henderson at the Mercantile said that when you first came to St. George, you were not married to Papa. She said you came alone and Papa married you to give Benjamin a father. Is that true?" Beatrice and Marcus exchanged a long look. They had always known this conversation might come someday, but they had hoped the children would be older before the town gossip reached their ears. "It is true," Marcus said after a moment. "Your mother came to St. George alone when she was expecting Benjamin. His biological father was not a good man and left your mother to face everything alone. I met your mother and saw how brave and strong she was, and I fell in love with her. So yes, I married her to give Benjamin a father, but also because I wanted to marry her, wanted to build a life with her." Rose processed this information. "So Benjamin is not really your son." "Benjamin is absolutely my son," Marcus said firmly. "I have been his father since before he was born." "Blood does not make a family, Rose. Love and commitment make a family. Benjamin is my son in every way that matters, just as you and Daniel are." "Does Benjamin know?" Rose asked. "No, and we have never seen a reason to tell him," Beatrice said. He has never known any father but your papa, and we do not want him to feel different or less loved. Rose nodded slowly. I understand, and I will not say anything. But Mama, can I tell you something? I think what you and Papa did was beautiful. You built a family from love, not just from blood. That is special. Beatrice felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. Rose hugged both her parents and went inside, leaving Marcus and Beatrice alone again. She is growing up, Marcus observed. They all are. Too fast, Beatrice agreed. Soon they will all be off living their own lives. We will still have each other, Marcus said, pulling her close. That is all I need. Benjamin did indeed begin courting Sarah Prescott, and it was clear to everyone who saw them together that they were well matched. Young love bloomed, sweet and sincere, and Beatrice found herself thinking about her own journey to love, how different Benjamin's experience was from hers. He had the security of family, the guidance of good parents, the freedom to choose a partner based on love rather than desperation. It was everything she had wanted for him. In the fall of 1897, when Benjamin was 18, he asked Marcus for permission to marry Sarah. Marcus, mindful of Benjamin's young age, suggested they wait a year to be certain of their feelings. Benjamin agreed, though it was clear he was already certain. The year passed, and the young couple's devotion only deepened. In October 1898, Benjamin and Sarah were married in the same little white church where Marcus and Beatrice had exchanged vows 20 years earlier. Beatrice cried happy tears as she watched her son, now a man, promise to love and cherish his bride. She thought about the terrified woman she had been, carrying this baby who was now standing tall and confident, starting his own family. After the ceremony, as the reception wound down, Benjamin found Beatrice standing alone for a moment, watching the celebration. "Mama," he said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what, darling?" "For everything. For raising me, for loving me, for giving me such a good life. I know Papa is not my biological father, but he is my father in every way that matters. And you both gave me the kind of childhood that taught me how to be a good man, how to love well. I hope I can give my own children what you gave me." Beatrice's throat tightened. "You know, Rose told me a few years ago. She thought I should know before I got married and started my own family. I was surprised at first, but Mama, it does not change anything. Papa is my father. He chose me, chose us, and that makes him more of a father than the man who provided the seed. I am proud to be Marcus Kind's son. He loves you so much," Beatrice whispered. "From the moment you were born, you were his, I know, and I am grateful every day for both of you." Benjamin hugged his mother tightly. "Thank you for being brave enough to come to St. George and smart enough to marry Papa." As Beatrice watched Benjamin return to his new bride, she felt Marcus's arms come around her from behind. "He knows," she said softly. "I heard. And he is right. He is my son, and nothing will ever change that." "We did a good job with him," Beatrice said, leaning back against Marcus's solid warmth. "We did a good job with all of them. But yes, Benjamin turned out pretty well, if I do say so myself." Benjamin and Sarah built a small house on the Kine Ranch property, planning to eventually take over the operation when Marcus was ready to step back. Rose, at 15, was already being courted by the son of a prominent rancher from a neighboring town. Daniel, at 13, was still more interested in horses and mischief than girls, but that would come in time. As the new century approached, Marcus and Beatrice found themselves looking back on their life together with deep satisfaction. They had built a successful ranch, raised 3 good children, contributed to their community, and most importantly, loved each other well. What had started as a marriage of convenience had become a love story for the ages, proof that the best foundations were built on choice and commitment rather than just passion. On their 20th wedding anniversary in October 1898, Marcus surprised Beatrice with a gift he had been working on in secret. He led her out to the barn, where he had converted a section into a beautiful workshop for her sewing. There were large windows for natural light, a proper cutting table, shelves for fabric and supplies, and even a new sewing machine, the latest model. "Marcus, this is wonderful," Beatrice exclaimed, looking around in delight. "When did you do all this?" "The boys and I have been working on it for months, whenever you were in town at the shop. I know you have been wanting to bring more of your work home, maybe teach Rose and someday a granddaughter your skills. This way you have a proper space to work." Beatrice threw her arms around her husband's neck. "Have I told you lately that I love you? You might have mentioned it," Marcus said with a grin, "but I never get tired of hearing it. I love you, Marcus Kine. You have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible." "The feeling is entirely mutual, Mrs. Kine." They kissed, long and sweet, two people who had chosen each other against the odds and built something beautiful from that choice. As the years continued to pass, the Kine family grew. Benjamin and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Marcus after his grandfather, in 1899. The sight of Marcus holding his grandson, tears of joy streaming down his weathered face, was something Beatrice would treasure forever. Rose married in 1901 to a good man named David Fletcher, and they settled on a ranch about 20 miles away. Daniel, showing his father's talent with horses, started a business breeding and training horses that quickly became successful. Marcus and Beatrice stepped back gradually from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, turning more responsibility over to Benjamin while they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other. They traveled a bit, visiting Marcus's family in Texas, and taking a trip to San Francisco that left them both amazed at how much the West had changed since their younger days. But no matter where they went, they were always happy to return to their ranch outside St. George, to the red cliffs and endless sky, to the house they had built and the land they had worked. It was home in the truest sense, filled with memories and love. On a warm evening in June 1905, Marcus and Beatrice sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 50s now, their hair showing threads of gray, their hands weathered by years of work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had taken a chance on love 27 years earlier. "You remember the day we met?" Marcus asked, taking Beatrice's hand. "You climbing down from that stagecoach, looking terrified and determined all at once." "I remember a cowboy with kind eyes who carried my trunk without being asked," Beatrice replied. "I remember thinking you were the first person in months who had treated me like I mattered. You did matter, you still do. You are everything to me, B. And you are everything to me. You saved me, Marcus, you and Benjamin both. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had almost given up." "You saved me too," Marcus said. "I was lonely, going through life without purpose. You gave me a family, a reason to work hard, someone to love and be loved by. That baby you were carrying did deserve a father, but I deserved a family too. We needed each other." Beatrice rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, perfectly content. In the distance, she could see Benjamin working with the cattle, his son young Marcus riding on the saddle in front of him, learning the ranch as Benjamin had learned it from Marcus. The cycle continued, generation to generation, built on the foundation of love and commitment that she and Marcus had established all those years ago. "We did good, did we not?" she asked softly. "We did better than good," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head. "We did magnificent." As the sun set once again over the red cliffs of Utah, painting the sky in those familiar shades of fire and gold, The kind family continued their evening routines. Children played, adults worked, and through it all, the love that Marcus and Beatrice had built stood strong and true, a testament to the power of choosing each other, of seeing worth where others saw shame, of building a family on the foundation of commitment rather than just circumstance. Beatrice Owens had arrived in St. George 6 months pregnant and ashamed, carrying a burden she thought might crush her. Marcus Kine had said that baby deserved a father, and in saying so, had given both mother and child a future filled with love and security and belonging. What had started as an act of kindness had become the greatest love story either of them could have imagined, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely beginnings. The years continued to bring both joys and sorrows, as all lives do. Marcus's mother passed away in 1907, and they made the journey to Texas for the funeral, where Beatrice finally met all of Marcus's family. His sisters embraced her warmly, thanking her for making their brother so happy. In 1910, Mrs. Weatherby died peacefully in her sleep, and Beatrice mourned the woman who had shown her unexpected kindness when she needed it most. But there were more joys than sorrows. Benjamin and Sarah had 3 more children, giving Marcus and Beatrice a total of 4 grandchildren from them. Rose had 2 daughters who loved to visit the ranch and learned sewing from their grandmother. Daniel married a spirited woman named Catherine in 1908, and they had twin boys in 1909 who kept everyone on their toes. Marcus and Beatrice settled into the comfortable rhythm of grandparenthood, spoiling their grandchildren with love and attention, passing on their skills and values to the next generation. They watched with satisfaction as their children and grandchildren thrived, knowing that the family they had built would continue long after they were gone. In 1913, on their 35th wedding anniversary, the entire Kine clan gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were children running everywhere, 3 generations of family sharing food and laughter and love. As Marcus and Beatrice stood in the center of it all, accepting toasts and well wishes, they looked around at what they had created and felt profound gratitude. Benjamin stood to give a toast, his voice strong and clear. 35 years ago, my father made the best decision of his life when he married my mother. He took on a woman who was alone and expecting a child that was not his, and he did it without hesitation because he saw something in her that the rest of the world missed. He saw strength and courage and worth. And in doing so, he gave me a father, gave my mother a partner, and built a family that has been the foundation of all our lives. Benjamin's voice grew thick with emotion. Papa, you taught me that being a father is not about biology. It is about showing up every single day and choosing to love. You chose me, you chose Mama, and you never wavered in that choice. You are the best man I know, and I am honored to be your son. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes, too moved to speak. Beatrice squeezed his hand, her own eyes wet. Rose stood next. Mama, Papa, you taught me that love is a verb, something you do rather than just something you feel. You worked for your marriage, for your family, for your dreams. You built this ranch and this family from nothing but determination and love. Thank you for showing us what a real partnership looks like. Daniel added his own toast. To the best parents anyone could ask for, you gave us roots and wings, taught us to work hard and love harder. Everything good in my life traces back to the 2 of you. As the celebration continued into the evening, Marcus pulled Beatrice aside for a quiet moment alone. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For saying yes all those years ago. For taking a chance on me. For building this life with me. For every day, every moment, every laugh and tear and triumph. For everything. You made it easy to say yes, Beatrice replied, touching his weathered face with gentle fingers. "You have been my rock, my love, my best friend. I could not have asked for a better partner in life." They kissed. These two people who had loved each other for 35 years and still felt their hearts quicken at each other's touch. Around them, their family laughed and celebrated, living proof that love could transform lives, that choosing each other was the greatest adventure of all. As the years moved into the late 1910s, Marcus and Beatrice slowed down even more, letting the younger generation take over most of the ranch operations. They spent their days puttering around their house, tending a small garden, visiting with their many grandchildren, and enjoying the peace of a life well lived. In the spring of 1920, Marcus took ill with pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts and Beatrice's devoted nursing, he grew weaker. On a quiet morning in late April, with Beatrice holding his hand and their children gathered around, Marcus Kine passed peacefully from this life. Beatrice was devastated. They had been together for 42 years, and she felt like half of herself had been torn away. But even in her grief, she was grateful. Grateful for every day they had shared, every moment of love, every challenge they had faced together. Marcus had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, had loved her completely and without reservation, had been the father Benjamin needed and the partner she had never dared hope for. At the funeral, Benjamin gave the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke of the man who had raised him. "My father was not perfect, but he was good. He was honest and hardworking and kind. He loved fiercely and without conditions. He took me as his son when he had no obligation to do so, and he loved me as completely as any father has ever loved a child. I am the man I am because of him, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to his example." After Marcus's death, Beatrice moved into a smaller house in town, closer to her dress shop and the community she had become such an integral part of. Her children urged her to come live with one of them, but Beatrice valued her independence. She was 71 years old, still sharp and capable, and she wanted to live her remaining years on her own terms. She continued to work at her dress shop, more for the love of the craft and the social connections than for the money. She spent time with her grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, passing on her skills and her stories. She spoke often of Marcus, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him long or well. In the evenings, Beatrice would sit on her small porch and watch the sun set over the red cliffs, just as she had done with Marcus for so many years. She would think about the scared young woman she had been, arriving in St. George with nothing but a carpet bag and a baby on the way. She would think about the cowboy who had seen past her shame to her worth, who had given her and Benjamin a future when they had none. Most of all, she would think about the life they had built together, the family they had raised, the love they had shared. It had not been the life she had planned or expected, but it had been so much better. Marcus Kine had been her salvation and her partner, her love and her best friend, and she would be grateful for him until her dying day. Beatrice lived to the remarkable age of 87, passing away peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1935. She was laid to rest beside Marcus in the St. George Cemetery, under the endless Utah sky they had both loved so much. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered to mourn her passing and celebrate her remarkable life. Benjamin, now an old man himself at 56, stood at his mother's grave with tears streaming down his weathered face. "Thank you, Mama," he whispered, "for being brave enough to come to St. George, for being strong enough to survive, for loving Papa and letting him love you, for giving me the best father a boy could ask for building a family that will last for generations. Thank you for everything." The Kine Ranch continued to be worked by Benjamin's children and grandchildren, the land that Marcus and Beatrice had built together still providing for their descendants. The dress shop in town eventually closed, but Beatrice's reputation as a master seamstress lived on in local legend. Most importantly, the values she and Marcus had instilled in their children, the importance of love and commitment and choosing each other every day, continued to shape their family for generations. In the end, Beatrice Owens Kine's story was one of redemption and transformation. She had arrived in St. George 6 months pregnant and ashamed, carrying a burden that seemed too heavy to bear. But Marcus Kine had looked at that baby and said he deserved a father, had looked at Beatrice and seen a woman worthy of love, had chosen them both and never looked back. Together, they had built a love story that defied the odds, a family that thrived on commitment rather than just circumstance, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was a story of second chances and the power of choosing love, of seeing worth where others saw only shame, of building something beautiful from the most unlikely beginnings. It was proof that the best families are not always born, but are sometimes built by people willing to look past the rules and judgments of society to the human hearts beneath. And in the red rock country of southern Utah, where the desert sun still paints the cliffs in shades of fire and gold, where the endless sky still stretches forever, the Kine family continues to thrive, living proof that love chosen is sometimes stronger than love that simply happens, that commitment matters more than circumstances, and that the words "that baby deserves a father" can change everything. Their story, the story of Beatrice and Marcus Kine, remains a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of seeing people for who they truly are rather than their circumstances, and the beautiful truth that families are built not just on blood, but on choice and dedication and the willingness to say yes to love, even when it comes in unexpected forms. It was a story of the American West, of hard work and perseverance, of community and family values. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and true, that would echo through the generations as a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with a simple act of kindness and the words "that baby deserves a father," and I would be honored to be that father.